All right, you're welcome to Bonnet Deck. And one of the things we're looking at today is Mace. And on the Mace, we're talking about the politics of nation. I believe that for anyone who sees himself or herself presently or sometimes not too far from now in a place where you have political power or you're in political strategy or you're engaged in some form of political action or the other, then it's important for you to take what I'm about to say seriously. Okay? So that being said, you're welcome to Mace, the Politics of Nations. My name is Harkheindzel Kenny Omiyale, and I will be facilitating this particular session. Now, let's move on a bit forward, with what we're about to go into. But before we do that, there is a disclaimer, and it's very simple. For everyone that is here, that is listening to me right now, it is in your best interest not to be overly critical or judgmental with what you're about to hear me say. It's important for you to see things from a clear mind, from an open mind, and from a meek mind that is ready to listen and be able to pull out the necessary wisdoms you're going to get from this. Now, I am not saying that all of the things that you would see here are things you would agree with, or all of the things you see here are things that you might feel are useful for you. However, once you have an open mind and you're ready to take on what is before us, especially once it comes to the destiny of your nation and the understanding of the political practices as they should be, then you're going to get all the value that you can from here. That being said, let's dash forward into it. So why a mace? Why is this titled a mace? Now, it's important for us to understand what a mace is. Now, a mace is a symbol of authority. It's a symbol of power. It's a symbol of security, especially in the context that we're giving now, a staff of office. Everywhere the mace is present, it connotes and notes that there is authority given to the people to deliberate, to make decisions, and to do whatever it is they've been assigned to do. Now, that being said, a mace was originally a weapon, but it became a symbol of authority of the people. This will help you to understand the trajectory we're going in this particular session. Moving forward, fundamentally, how should we see politics? Now, politics has different definitions. If you have to ask 10 people what politics is, there's a very high chance you're going to get 10 different answers, okay? So this is the perception of politics as you should see it. Now, politics is the management, the control, and the distribution of resources within a common context for the greater good of a group of people. Okay, now this includes the methods and the activities that are associated with the running of this government or organization or movement. Anything that has to do with the management, control, and distribution of resources, different kinds of resources, financial resources, human resources, capital, territorial, minerals, technological, whatever resources there is. Any system and structure who is saddled with the power and authority and the decision making to manage, control, and distribute these resources in the common interest for the greater good of the people. That is politics in action. Okay. Now, it's also fundamentally important for you to understand that politics are being broken into different fragments, and you need to understand this. Okay. Now, we have politics that affect economy. We have politics that affect legalistic politics. So these are the parts that are in charge of the laws, the laws of the lands and all of that. Economic policy politics talks about the management of resources around an economy of a state, a nation, or a conglomerate, as the case may be. We also have politics in the area of cultural effects, which affect the behavior of people, how people think, what people see as good and bad, okay? Legal politics is about what people see as right and wrong, while cultural politics is what people see as good and bad. And we'll also have politics broken into society. Now, social in the aspect of politics involves the human-to-human interaction. You know, when people begin to come together, relate together, anything that brings more than one person for a certain goal, a certain mission, there will be, it's just a matter of time before political sentiments and actions begin to come from that. So it's important that when you're thinking of politics, you also have to think of it in these terms. It's not just about leading a nation. There are economic aspects, there are legal aspects, there are cultural aspects, and there are also social aspects. Now, the power dynamics of politics is one of the things that makes a lot of people want to go into politics and also make a few people shy away from politics. Now, it's important for you to realize that when it comes to politics, power and authority is key. You must understand the dynamics and the fundamentals of power and authority. When you know what power is and when you know what authority is and how interconnected these things are, then you're beginning to understand politics. Now, by the ideal sense, power in a democratic government should belong to the people, while the leaders are given the authority to lead and to make decisions on behalf of the people. That is very clear. Now, the core of politics is about decision making. Now, making decisions that is in the interest of those who gave the authority to the leaders. What that means is that the leader is not above the people, but the leader has the authority that is given by the power the people possess to elect a leader, to authorize a leader, someone to speak for them, to make decisions in their best interest, and to guarantee them a future and a greater life. This is what politics should be. So depending on the nation you are at right now, listening to this, I want you to place vis and vis the political practices that you're having that is in operation right now, whether in your local government, whether in your state government, your federal government, whatever it is, especially if it is a democratic government, okay? You must understand this power and authority. So what makes a nation? Because essentially, when we're thinking politics, we're looking at politics from a national perspective. We're looking at people who will man the affairs of a state, of a nation, of the country. So what are the things that makes a nation? It is important because when you have any of these elements missing, it becomes more difficult to practice sustaining politics in the ideal sense of politics. Now, first and foremost, history of that nation is key. Where did the nation start from? And how did it get to where it is today? Culture is important. What is the general way of life of this particular people who call themselves a nation? Language, do they have a common language? The more dissolved a language of the people is, the more difficult it will be for you to bring them under a common umbrella of political action and leadership. Currency and trade is important because when people begin to transact with one another, tenders are necessary, okay? What is the official tender of that nation? And what is the value of that tender with surrounding nations and the world at large? And finally, what is the goal of the nation? What is the vision of the nation? This being said, the goal of a nation is known if you pick any random citizen of that nation and they are not able to tell you what the goal or the vision of that nation is, that nation has a problem. It probably means it is not a unified nation, and it is a nation that the people are not confident enough of the leadership of that country. Therefore, they don't know where the country is going. Okay, so these are very important parts that you need to understand in the making of a nation: history, culture, language, currency and trade, as well as goal and vision. Now, so what really makes a nation? We mentioned history. Who named the nation? Whose names are on your streets, are your state, and on your important monuments? These are the parts of what makes the history of a nation. Are you unique enough to be different from others? That's the culture. Is when they see you anywhere else, is it easy to know that you are a citizen of this particular nation based on your culture, which is supposed to be what makes you unique around the people who might be different from you? Language. Can you understand yourselves? And can you be on the same page for a long period of time? That is the unification of language. Currency has also been established, an accepted tender for means of exchange of goods for goods, goods for services, services for services, or whatever you have. And also goals and visions. So what are you doing with yourselves now as a nation? And how is that creating your future together as a nation? Or the better questions, is there a future for your nation? That is something for you to ponder and think about. So while that is being said and done, it's important for us to come to the Nigerian game, because this particular session, the focus and emphasis is on the Nigerian game. How do you play the Nigerian game? And how do you make sure that you're on the right side of it, or you are able to manage things as they are? First thing is that the way politics is being practiced in Nigeria, it is not conventional. In a way, it is not ideal. Okay, the way politics is being managed in Nigeria, there is nothing democratic about it. Okay, that is a spoiler, and that's something you should know currently as at 2021 when this session was being had. Now, it's also important that people choose the leader and the leader serves the people. The moment this mentality shifts, it means there is a problem. The people do not serve the leader. It is the leader that serves the people. And this makes sure that the power remains resident in the people while the authority remains resident in the leader. That is the people who have been chosen to represent and to make decisions for the higher majority. Leaders have authority, people have power. And this is the important thing. Under no circumstance should the leader have full access to power beyond the collective power of the people who elected that leader. The moment this happens, you do not have a political nation. You have a tyranny being born. Okay? You have tyranny becoming the culture and the mentality of such a state or a country. It must be done in such a way. The true test of political power of a leader is to ensure that power continues to be dissolved from him, to ensure that all he has is authority. He must be able to serve the people who gave him the authority in such a way that the power of the people continue to increase in such a way that if he has done a good job or she has done a good job, the power of the people will be able to reauthorize him to continue to make decisions in the interest of the people. This is how democratic politics should be engaged. But like we know, a lot of things have changed. So where is the power here? The power is with the elite, and the elite have financial power to move resources. Please listen to this carefully. The middle class have economic power. Now remember, this is power, not authority. Power is the ability to do work, okay? Authority is delegated functionality. So the middle class have economic power. The elite have financial power to move resources. Now, the lower class have commercial power. You must understand this because in order to deal with these different levels, because they have accumulated or designated with them different kinds of power, the manner of approach to these classes will always be different. So if you use the wrong approach, you're not going to get the best from them. And for other levels, you've got miscellaneous. There are other forms of power that may be unaccounted for. So some people use, so when you hear things like a forceful show of power, so like the NSAS movement that happened, which is to protest against the forceful show of power. This is because the police officers were to have authority and power. It's important. But what they are giving more of should be authority. What they should use more of should be authority and not power. But when someone has a gun and you don't have a gun, the person obviously has more power because based on their decisions and choices, it can affect you positively or negatively. And that's what power does. Power is to make change, to create things, to make things to happen. So when you hire thugs, you're dealing with physical power that certain people might not have. So based on that violence and physical power that these thugs or hoodlums supposedly have, they use that to threaten people in order to put them under, which is what power does, is the ability to make things happen. Okay, so there is the power. So when you're thinking politically, you must learn how to engage people at different levels. So when it comes to nation building pragmatics, we've got to get practical now, okay? Nation building is possible. Nation building can happen. Nation building is strategic. Now, the first thing you need to understand about nation building is that there is a wisdom to nation building. Now, the wisdom to nation building talks about the know-how. How do you build a nation? How do you engage politics, which is one of the things we've been talking about? How do you engage politics? How do you engage people? How do you engage resources? How do you manage authority? How do you delegate power? How do you get these things done? That is the wisdom dimension of nation building. You also have the point of resources, which are the means to do. Okay, resources help you to get things done. Wisdom shows you how things can be done. If you have wisdom without resources, you don't have power. If you have resources without wisdom, you will mismanage that power. Do you understand? Now, while wisdom is good, while resources is good, you need structure. Structure talks about the efficiency for the use of wisdom and resources. Structure is that point that connects wisdom and resources. How do you use wisdom? How do you get wisdom? Who has the wisdom? Where do you place this particular person? How is that wisdom communicated? Okay, structure helps you with this. Resources, who owns what? Where is what is owned? Position, How will that be used? How can it be communicated, transported? I wanted to say transported. Transported, and how do we make sure that the vision behind the pragmatics of nation building is done? And also you now have power, which can be centralized power, meaning power is with a central body or a central office, like executive office. We have decentralized power, which is power is given to the people. What is that power? The ability to make decisions, okay? And it can also be hybrid, where there's a mixture of centralized as well as decentralized power. Now, this is key. And finally, management, which is separating ideation from human nature. There are many people who want to engage nation building, especially in the area of politics, that all they have is passion and an idea. You don't understand how politics work. Politics involves understanding human nature, learning how to influence people, learning how to manage people's expectations. You need to understand this. Sometimes politics is that gray line between good and bad and right and wrong. It's about the balance of these things, and that's why management is key. You cannot entirely drift to one side because there are people on both extreme sides. And so if you lean too well to one particular side, then it will seem like you're not against the other people, and that is wrong, okay? And that will not be in your best interest, okay? So remember this: wisdom, resources, structure, power, management would help you to understand the pragmatics of nation building. Now, this is just like a crash session. If I want to take wisdom, I can take wisdom for 2 weeks because there's a whole lot involved for this, okay? So for each of these, there is mastery involved. There is knowledge, there is intelligence involved in the ability to structure and to manipulate and work through this particular pragmatics that has been mentioned, okay? Let's move on. Now, you must also need to note that after all of this has been said and done, what next? Always remember, it's about power and authority. It's about authority and power of resources. Who uses what? What power, what value do these resources have in themselves? Remember, when I talk about resources, resources talks about ideation, it talks about finance, it talks about capital, it talks about human, it talks about territory, it talks about force. Resources is anything you can use as a tool to get certain things done. These are resources. So you must understand that this is about the authority and the power of resources. You also need to understand that what next is that it's about the influence over laws and policies. If you want to engage the pragmatics of nation building from this point that you are, you must understand power and authority. But that's not enough. You must have power and authority. Have power by being influential, letting people know you, being connected to a lot of people. Have authority by being elected, being in certain places where your decisions affect people. Okay, so the same thing is your decision affects resources, and you also have power. That means resources to make things happen. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be the one to have everything. You might have a network of people who have different levels of power and authority across this points and strata of resources. Okay, you also must have influence over laws and policies, meaning that are you at a position where you are part of those who make the decision about what is good and what is right? If you're not, then it resists your ability for nation building, because you cannot build a nation without having access to the authority and the power of legality, of law, and of policy. It's also about who tells the story. PR is important. Do not let the enemy tell your story. It's one of the things I really loved about Donald Trump, even though it seemed that a lot of people were against it. There was one thing he got right, and that is he controlled the narrative of his own story. In the exercise of nation building pragmatics, you must be the one who tell your own story. Do not give any other person the authority or the power to tell your story, because no one can tell a better story about you like you. So you must be in the public ears. You must be in the public eyes. People must see you do things. People must see you say things with passion, with intelligence, with emotions, in order to be able to carry people along. And it is also about influence along the ladder into the elite and the middle class. If you are not in the middle class, if you're not in the elite, that means if you don't have authority over economy, if you don't have power over commerce, it might be a bit difficult because you will not be able to have access to resources, and the right class of people or team that helps you to do things well. So this is the next thing you have to think about. This is what you really have to commit to doing well and doing right. Okay, that being said, how next? We talked about what next. Now we're talking about how next. You see, it's about thinking ahead. You need to choose strategy over emotions. It's so sad that many people in this part of the world are highly sentimental and emotional. And that's one of the things politicians are not. Politicians are never emotional, they are always strategic. The mark of a good politician is he chooses strategy over emotion. It doesn't mean that you don't get emotions, but you always understand the strategy behind the emotions and you use it well. Now, this is the key here. Every time you are responding to emotions, maybe you hear in news or something happens, there's a protest and all of that, it's a sign that you are already following the systems of those who are thinking strategy, because strategy dictates emotions. So you must understand that. So how do you get things done? By thinking ahead, by having a think tank, by having people who are learned, intelligent, passionate, and ready to give all to formulate, implement, execute, and create what will make the nation work. It is through strategy that nations are built, not through emotions. Now, at this point, you also need to note that it is first a game of strong ideas. Your ideas must be strong. You must be able to stand the test of time, stand the test of opposition, stand the test of attacks. Now, the strength of your ideas, now, it doesn't need mass approval at this point. It only needs potential and might. Okay? If you don't have a strong idea, I might be holding a session soon that teaches people how to craft strong ideas, but this is not the session for that. Okay. Now, using resources to your advantage creates influence. Influence is using resources to your advantage. You cannot have influence if you don't first become aware of the resources that you have or the resources that you can use. Remember, it all goes back to strategy. Strategy is key. People do not want to hear your ideas. People want to be shown what to do. That is the strategy of sociology, of human management, human control, human culture. Whether it's through songs, it's through movies, it's through blogs, through podcasts, whatever means of media attention you can use, realize this fact that people do not want to hear your ideas. So don't be a preacher of ideas. Show them what they have to do. This is very key. That's what to do next. That's how to do it next. Now, the next thing is where next? And this is key as well. Listen to this. You have to make emotions to collide with ideas. That's how to have strong ideas. Ideas that are not just intellectual, that are also emotional, that are relevant, that people can relate with, given the position and the state they are at the moment. Okay? That involves engaging people. If you have a political idea, before it goes mainstream, have you sold it to your family? Do they buy it? To your school, to your church, to your friends? Now, if nobody fights against your idea, it's not a strong idea enough. You need resistance to build a strong idea. Just the same way you need carbon to be under pressure, immense pressure, for diamonds to be formed. Okay, so you need to engage people. It helps to know how strong, how relevant, how viable, how emotional, how connected they can be with the ideas that you tend to sell. And everybody who begins to connect emotionally with your idea, that is nowhere to stop. Once someone connects emotionally with an idea, you must bring them to a point where they have a sense of belonging with that idea. And once they have a sense of belonging with that idea, you must delegate certain things to them that makes them feel like a part of the active force towards the propagation of that idea. And once they have done that to a certain level, then you can bring them up to the point of decision making to further strengthen the idea. This is how to do it, guys. Do not just solve the problems of the people. Sell your ideas as responsible for the solutions you hand over to people. So someone is sick, don't just pay for their hospital bills. No, after you have paid for their hospital bills, let them know that what enabled you with the resources to pay for the hospital bills is this certain idea. So there is a guilt associated with your idea because it was through the idea that they got health. Some people is food, some people is education, some people is good roads. Whatever the problems of people are, when you provide a solution with that, always make sure that your idea is embedded in that solution. And that is what connects it to the hearts of the people. Now, influence by sight, by the sense. So influence people by what they see, what they hear, and how they feel. Always make sure that your ideas are in visual forms, your ideas are in audio forms, and your ideas are in emotional form, such a way that everyone who connects with it either connects with it visually, connects with it based on what they hear, or connects with it based on how it makes them feel. This is how to engage people. And do not start from the lowest level. I'm sure many people have, oh, if you want to engage politics, always start from the lowest level. No. At this point, there's a disruption in how politics is being done. Don't start from the lowest level. Start at all levels. So it means that you must have people at every level, at every stage. Remember, people have resources, and the more resources you have, the more influence you have. The more influence you have, the more you can be backed with power. And the more you are backed with power, the more authority you have. And the more authority you have, the easier it is to lead and determine and make decisions for people. So why next? We talked about what next, how next, where next, why next. Listen to this. We are at a point where we have to define the future of this nation for the next 50 years. Listen to me and listen good. What we are doing right now is going to be the framework from which our nation is going to look like in the next 50 years. So everything that has happened up until now is not really necessary. Again, moving forward, we can use it as a lesson in history, but now we determine our own fate. The way we lead the nation going forward, there is no template for it that has already been written. It has to be created. And that is where the Mace is the power to make decisions going forward in the interest of the common good. Now, the old system must not be allowed to continue. By the old system, I mean the old school of thought, the old policies, the old leaders or servants, the whole structure, everything that determines to the systems of governance till now must not be allowed to continue. Reason is it is too far from present day reality and it is so far from relevance. The thought pattern that these people have cannot resonate with the thought pattern of the youth who are the leaders of today, not tomorrow, guys, today. So you must begin to see the reason why nation building must be engaged in. It is your time to serve your nation with character and wisdom. Without these things, you're going to lose on all fronts, and there'll be nothing to show forth for your nation and for your own time. You need to understand this, that when it comes to the games of politics, a powerful man will always defeat a man who is wise without power. If you are wise and you don't have access to resources, you cannot be influential as a wise man. So if you are wise, make sure that you must get influence without wisdom, because influence will give you attention, attention will give you power, and power, when used well, will give you authority. And it is authority that you need to lead people and to lead a nation or a country. So your generation is asking you, are you the one who is to come, or should we wait for another? Are you the one who will damn the old and embrace the new and move this nation, your nation, to the place you know deep within your heart that this nation should be? Or will you continue to give in to the old mindset, the old generation, the old system to dictate what the system is? But you need to understand, the old system is doomed to fall because the world is evolving into a new thing. We're having new forms of currencies, digital currencies, new forms of government. Culture is evolving, a lot of things. And so you need a new mind to be able to map this out and be able to create a course along the line of politics, policy, and polity. Okay, and this is how to build a nation. Now, you must understand that building a nation is beyond a 40-minute session or a 30-minute session. There is a whole lot more. But one of the things I want to do with this is to spark that fire for you to know that things can be done well by strategy, not by emotion. Anyone who calls you to protest, protest is not bad in itself. Protest is a resource. Listen, protest is a resource. What are you using that resource for? How is that resource giving you influence? Are you just making noise and giving into emotion, or you are thinking strategy? It is good to protest, but it is better to be in the house where the laws are being done, where the rules are being done, being with the people who make this decision. See, in the past, the purpose of protest is to call the attention of people to certain things in order to influence their decision. But the moment you are able to get into the room to speak with someone and have the power to influence their decision, you do not need a protest. Protest is a wake-up call to those who you have elected that you have power and they have authority. But if they've been able to have behind you more power than you have collectively, then your protest is useless. What you should actually do is to go back on the drawing board and increase your power base, until you get to a point where you have more power than the people you have elected, because that is how it should be. The more power you have, the more they are willing to listen to you, because you have the stakes, and if they don't listen to you because of the power that you have, you lose it. So get the right people into the police, get the right people into banking, get the right people into commerce, get the right people into the economy, into the systems of the elite and the middle class. Get the right people who speak the same language. Then you'll be able to grow power and influence in order to make political decisions. Okay, so this is where I'm going to be calling it a day here today. Remember, you have within you what it takes to create goodness out of badness, to create light out of darkness, to bring hope out of despair and despondency. But you have to do it by understanding the politics of nations, how nations can thrive, how nations can grow. I believe that this will help anyone out there who is really thinking about growing a nation, making your community better, making your family better, making your organization better, making the world a better place. So I'll leave you with this. The question that your generation is asking you: are you the one who is to come, or should we wait for another person? Now, that is a question that you would answer to your children, their children, and to your own generation. And I only hope that you make the right choice, you make the right decision from here moving on forward. May you always walk in the face of the Lord, and wherever you go, may you continue to be a beacon of light, to show light to the people who abide in darkness. Have a wonderful time, and I'll see you again. I also felt I should say this. You might have questions. In fact, you should have questions. And so if you have questions based on some of the things you've heard, maybe you don't agree with them. Maybe you do agree with them, but you need clarification. You can always have a conversation and connect with me. And I'll be more than happy to show you how some of these things are done, or how to engage nation building from a righteous point, from a character point, from a good point. Till next time I see you, keep growing,